Hello everybody and welcome. I'm the Rambling Director, and today we're going to do a little bit of a different type of video. This is just talking about the Oscar-winning special effects behind the 1960 classic The Time Machine by George Pal, starring Rod Taylor, Alan Young, and Yvette Mimieux. This is one of my favorite films, and I actually have a hour-and-a-half long analysis of this video coming out on my channel. But I wanted to do this as sort of a supplementary. That long video is talking more about the story and the themes of the original film, but this, I just wanted to focus on the special effects, because as I say in that video, there's a pretty massive special effects sequence in this film, which was actually what inspired me to become a filmmaker. So I just wanted to speak on some of the fabulous effects that sell you on the idea that you are sliding through time. And I use that phrase deliberately because the Time Machine was actually designed to look like a sled. Director George Pal had fond memories of sleighing as a child, and so one of his things that he really wanted from the machine was to have the elegance of a sleigh, something sort of shapely. And if you look at the bars on the actual machine, you'll see that's exactly what the machine looks like, a giant sled. It almost looks like a sled from a fantasy movie. Now, the original design that he was given kind of looked a bit like an electric chair. He didn't like it. But the one element that he took away that he really adored was a giant dish on the back. It kind of had the look of an abstract propeller pushing the sled forward. And if you really think about it in basic terms, that's kind of what the machine looks like, a sled with a big fan on the back, just made really fancy. The dish on the back actually has 365 bolts on it. That's kind of a neat little touch. Something that's so subtle nobody would ever notice unless it was pointed out. But it's just one of those things where, sometimes a director does something not because anybody else will know, but because they know. And it's a fun little thing for them to hold in their heart. I do that on all of my films. Another thing that Pal wanted was for the dish to spin clockwise when going into the future and counterclockwise when going into the past. However, the dish was a very fragile element, and if you look closely in the film, there's several times when Rod Taylor is traveling into the future where the dish is warping slightly as it spins. And so the budget would not allow for them to go back and redesign the dish so that it would hold up to the strain, and they figured it was probably better to just let it go in one direction and not mess with it too much. The Time Machine in the book had metal bars all around it. It's powered by a crystal. This time, the crystal is put on the handle. In addition, there's a nice little touch in the film where whenever Rod Taylor leaves the machine, he takes the handle off. That's because in the book, the time traveler says he's not worried about when the Morlocks steal the machine that they would set it off accidentally because it won't work without the levers. The gorgeous design work and construction was done by Wah Chang, who is now famous for his work on Star Trek, the original series. Something else that Wah Chang designed and built was the fabulous miniature, which Rod Taylor's character George uses at the beginning of the film to demonstrate that the machine can work. That's a beautiful little machine, and he sticks a cigar in it to kind of emulate the time traveler sitting in the saddle. It was formed out of clay, cast, and then put together with a low-melt metal. This gorgeous little model, which is slightly different than its larger successor, was actually taken home by George Pal, and he kept it on his mantelpiece. That is, until his home burned down in the Bel Air fires, at which point, naturally, because it was made with a low-melt material, the machine basically was destroyed irreparably. It's really sad to think of this little piece of movie history, so elegant and beautiful, probably turned into a pile of melted metal. It's really kind of devastating. In order to create the illusion of the machine traveling through time, George Pal called his old friends at Projects Unlimited. Although most of the time-traveling sequence was scripted, only a madman would have ever scripted these things in 1960. Luckily, George Pal was crazy. Now, my personal favorite part of the time lapse that we see when George just begins his journey is actually the apples growing. And I'm going to allow the team at Projects Unlimited to explain exactly how the apple shot worked, because I was fascinated when I first found out. I thought I had an idea of how it worked, but I was completely wrong.
An interesting fact is that the matte shots were done by Bill Brace. He did very realistic renderings of flowers and plants for the LA Times.
So we set up his canvas in front of the camera, a locked-off camera, and he just started to paint frame by frame. That's how those scenes were done.
That's right. Can you imagine? Everything you're seeing in front of you is a painting. I mean, it's so hyper-realistic. I kind of assumed that it was stop motion done with a miniature branch and that they were adding and subtracting different sizes of apples, but no, everything was being created right out of the mind and channeled through the paintbrush of an incredible artist. And that's all they needed to sell you on this fantastic little piece of cinema. Although the special effects as a whole won an Oscar, I feel like this one shot should have won like a mini Oscar, just a little extra recognition. Another great, if slightly outdated shot is the snail racing along the floor as the flowers swing wide their petals to embrace the morning light. The snail was actually just a little rubber snail. All of this was done with stop motion, and you can tell it's stop motion, but it's really great. The time-lapse photography is actually the thing that always gets the most recognition, and that's because real time-lapses were used. Every time you see people speeding along the street, that's a real time-lapse, not stop motion or anything like that. There's also lots of time-lapses of petals and flowers opening and closing. One thing that I always thought was very interesting was the stop motion on the candle melting, as well as the clock spinning around. Now, this was not just a time lapse. They didn't just set the candle burning and let time pass. No, this was done with stop motion.
We just had a light that went on a track and just moved it, one frame at a time.
No computers.
Well, I'm sure some things have been made easier, but other things we did probably as fast or maybe faster than you could do with a computer.
I always thought this was real time-lapse photography of the sky, but it's actually not. It's a light on a track. The fact that these shots still fool people still think that this is really the sun and the moon, that really is a testament to how great these special effects hold up. Yeah, not all of them are perfect. Some of the stop motion doesn't look fully real anymore, but my gosh, some of it, I'm not sure it would look as good if you actually did use real time-lapse photography. Another one of my personal favorites is George watching this building get constructed. It's a little simple, and you can tell it's a miniature, but my gosh, it's so well put together. By the way, the iconic strobing effect of the day and night passing was not accomplished by adding black frames or something like that. If you look really close and you slow down the film, you can actually see that it's a lighting effect. I believe what they did was put a dark blue gel, the sort of thing that you would use for day for night shots, on a big disc and span it in front of the light. And by doing this, it quickly flashes light and dark to emulate day and night passing. Now that one I was really surprised when I learned about, because I was certain that they had just inserted black frames, but no, they did it for real. There are some moments in this film that I feel like should be like some of the most iconic, and yet they don't really get a lot of recognition from people. And one of them is the Morlock aging into dust. I just think this is a great effect. And it was done very similar to the effects in Raiders of the Lost Ark when the people are melting. What is, and always has been, undoubtedly the most iconic use of time-lapse photography in the film is the mannequin. Yeah, it's a pretty simple gimmick, but it's brilliant. How do you show time passing in a way that everybody can relate to? The changing fashion of women's apparel, of course. Another great little piece of matte painting work used to show the times and the seasons passing is out of George's window as frost and snow appear and disappear as winter turns into spring. It's just such a great shot. Next, of course, is the scene that inspired me to become a filmmaker, the atomic destruction of London. Now, I don't want to ignore the fantastic build-up, because that, of course, is part of why the scene works. But I'm just going to talk about the actual effects in the destruction. We start off with a miniature Amtrak, and even the front of Philby's department store. A huge flash of light indicates the bomb going off. Then we cut into stock footage of a real nuclear blast in the background, which takes the place of the beautiful miniature. This visually shows us, as George tells us, that the labor of centuries has disappeared, literally evaporated in an instant. We see the destruction of a lot of great little miniatures. I particularly love watching the glass on Philby's department store be ripped in by the blast wave, as if the glass has crumpled under the shock wave. I love that. The street splits open. This was done very simply. The set was made in two halves to begin with and then pulled apart. As George says, Mother Nature, roused by man's violence, responds with volcanic violence of her own. And if you watch closely, some of the stock footage of volcanoes and lava is actually stuff that was used in a couple of George Pal movies. He reused the stock footage like it owed him money. The beautiful reddish-orange lava that spills into the cracks and has little bits that are on fire and lots of black dust pouring along inside of it and covering up the little model cars. If you want to know what this is, it's actually incredible because it works so well. It even has a vibrant sort of glow to it. This was oatmeal. Gallons and gallons of oatmeal, colored with red and orange food coloring. And for these close-up shots, you can see the top is actually on fire, just like real lava would be. It's a really lovely touch. I mean, nobody was going to criticize the film if they didn't have fire on top, but they took the extra effort to make it happen. I just love watching the cars get swallowed by lava. I don't know why, but it's very satisfying to me. And there's also some times where you can see they fed air up through the cracks in the street to give the lava a bubbling effect. It's just fabulous. Another miniature set that I just think is fabulous is the wells. Now, the wells were actually a real-life set that Rod Taylor and the Eloy interact with, but then it switches to this miniature version so that we can see the Morlock's lair being blown up. 5 or 6 of these tunnels just have smoke and pyrotechnics and miniature explosions going off, and the entire thing sinks into the ground, just to show that the layer of the Morlocks is collapsed and nobody made it out alive. Oh, my gosh, what an exciting ending. When Rod Taylor is engulfed by the lava, you can see that this is actually a blue screen shot, which is then immediately replaced by Rod and the machine in front of a real rock background. The mountain supposedly wears away under the elements, and it's really cute. You can tell it's just little miniature rocks put in front of a screen, and my gosh, is it cute. I've always wondered if maybe they could have done this effect slightly better if they had had, like, a rock wall made of wax and then melted it from the underside. I don't know. Maybe it would have just looked like a bunch of wax melting. But I do wonder if maybe they could have done that better. It's really the only effect like it in the movie, though, where I feel like it's just not very well done. But like I said, it is the only time, so I give it a pass personally. Next, we get some more hyper-realistic matte paintings showing the building of the Great Commune that the Eloy would later live in. We also watch it be destroyed and fall into disrepair. Again, these type of matte paintings are pretty cool because they pretty much take up the whole screen. The whole shot is just an animated painting. There's nothing really fancy about it. There's no combination of different processes. No, it's literally just an artist and his paint being filmed over a length of time as he adds and takes away elements to the painting. This sort of simplicity and beauty is something that you just don't see a whole lot anymore. Because back in the day, special effects were not about looking realistic. They were about getting a point across, showing you what the director wanted you to see. Now we try to grade special effects by their realism. And then we're always disappointed that the CG or whatever other process doesn't look realistic. Well, guess what? It's because it isn't real, people. Get a life. Next, I actually just want to talk about matte shots. To those of you who know what I'm talking about, this might seem less glamorous as the thing to close on in this video. And to those who don't know what I'm talking about, you might be saying, hold on, weren't you just talking about matte paintings already? No. Matte shots are specifically the way sets are expanded or augmented using other pieces of footage, sometimes matte paintings, sometimes models, etc. This film does a few really fancy things with matte shots. This is sort of like how now you might build the front of a house and then add the roof and the other elements with CGI. A lot of people don't know this, but that's not because CGI came along and we got lazy. No, since the birth of cinema, we have been using matte paintings to do exactly that. It always has been the exception that people have hundreds of millions of dollars, like Jim Cameron's Titanic, to just throw away. There was never a real golden age of cinema where everything had to be built for real if you wanted to see it on film. No, it just that period of time is a myth. It never existed. Matte paintings have always done what CGI is doing now. This film actually does something really, really unique that I don't think I've ever seen another movie do. I could be wrong, but I don't think I've ever seen any movie do it. It actually combines two locations and a matte painting together as three different thirds of a shot to create a space that is not real. It never existed in reality. It happens right at the beginning of the movie when Philby is on his way from his store to George's house. You see, the top, representing 1899 London, is entirely a painting. This area over here with the department store and this little bridge area is all the backlot of Culver City. And the separate element is shot in front of a house set, probably filmed in the real outdoors with real grass and dirt. The next time we see a matte painting shot is the painting of London in the 19 teens, representing the battles in World War I. This is a combination of miniatures, models, and matte painting, as well as real fire elements. We then scootle-boot along into the future, and we see that Philby's department store is now a major chain. The bridge set is still there, and the cobblestone streets have been replaced with asphalt, with cars parked on them. We also see an underground air raid shelter has been built. The above part is still a matte painting. Part of it is a painting representing the miniature, and another part is entirely fictional over here. And you can see where the tree line has been continued up to disguise those two elements. George's house, which was hit by a bomb, has completely been erased and is replaced here with this little curb and the dirt walkway going into the park. Now, again, you see what they've done here is filmed at a real park and then stitched it together with the set that's on the back lot. This is really super creative stuff, people. I mean, just look at it. I mean, yeah, you can tell how it was done because of the matte lines, but the fact that they did it at all and kept the perspective so wonderfully connected, it feels like a single location. It feels like this could exist in real life because they don't get too fanciful with it. I actually don't know that I've seen anything else this blasé in trying to map together several into a realistic, normal-looking scene this way. I mean, it's really brilliant the way they did it. Might also point out that these outfits that the civil defense people are wearing are actually the outfits from Forbidden Planet. And I pointed out in my major video that there's actually a couple of Forbidden Planet props that are kind of reused in this film. Now, again, I just wanted to point out the way they did this city street scene because I just think it's super creative. Another one of Hua Chang's stellar designs was the Sphinx. I love this Sphinx. I think it's super cool. And if you look closely, you can actually see this one is done way better. I think you could actually miss it in some shots. The bottom element of the Sphinx is a real set that was built and the Eloi are really interacting with it. But the top part, the actual Sphinx part, is entirely a model. Yeah, they just matted the model on top of the real set. No need to build this thing for real 50 feet tall. Now, if this was done in the modern era, or if it had been done in the 80s or 90s, I have no doubt that this would be a perfect effect. You wouldn't be able to tell it was a miniature at all. But the only reason we have the great effects we do in things like the Indiana Jones movies is because of people daring to do these wild, crazy matte shots that do stand out to us now, but helped people learn so much about the craft and how to appropriately use them better with every rendition. Now, the commune that the Eloi live in was actually only built up to a certain point. It was built outside, and these steps actually were already on the back lot. They just repurposed them. You could see that they built the doorway and part of the wall that holds the door, but nothing else. Look closely and you can see more matte lines. These little sphinxes, the entire upper walls and even the side walls up to a point, and all of this big glass dome ceiling, all of it is a matte painting. The only real part is this bottom area where Rod Taylor is. And you can see on the inside, they did the same thing. There's actually no roof on this thing. The matte painting goes around the top of the door, just enough for Rod Taylor to be able to enter. Part of the reason why is because sunlight would be the cheapest way to light this huge set. So they built it out on the studio parking lot. If you notice, they didn't even fully fill this space with tables. Some of these tables and the fruit in foreground, this curtain, among other things, is all part of the matte painting. I bet a lot of you wouldn't have noticed that bottom area was painted, but now that I pointed out, it's pretty obvious, isn't it? In fact, this little area is all that's real. Everything else is a painting. Remember how I said they built this thing on the studio parking lot? Well, something that I always thought was interesting as a kid was these lines on the ground. I always thought, oh man, I wonder what those lines mean. Maybe it's some sort of design that maybe Hua Chang came up with, some interesting piece of visual storytelling. But no, it's actually the lines from the parking lot. They just didn't bother to paint over it. And to be fair, I'm glad they didn't. It adds a really nice element of intrigue to it because when you don't know that that's what they did, you do stop and wonder, like, ooh, what does that mean? It doesn't mean anything. It means that there was a lot of parking spaces that interns didn't get to use that month. Again, I think the most impressive of these elements is the matting together of various locations. I've just never seen it done this way to this extent. I mean, think about Citizen Kane. You might have two locations stitched together with a matte painting in between them, but I've rarely seen two locations just bridged together with nothing between them, just a solid line. It was a bold chance to try to film it that way, and it really succeeded. Yeah, you can tell there's an effect going on, but the shots are pretty short, and it's all so well lined up that I think that the ingenuity and the risk-taking they did to make that happen, it really balances out for the fact that the effect is not a perfect effect. It's not totally realistic. But again, that wasn't what special effects were meant to be. Now, by the way, some of these big, thick black matte lines would not have been visible when the film came out. Nowadays, we see those things and say, oh, it's a mistake. In fact, I'm guilty of this too. I think in my longer feature-length analysis of The Time Machine, I actually did call these matte lines a mistake, but that's not technically true. See, a lot of the films that we watch now on our huge HD TVs with perfect clarity and super sharp images were originally shown in movie theaters on a much different film stock. And these softer prints, so to speak, were a little bit more forgiving. There was a little bit of a glow to them, a little bit less focus. Things were a little bit fuzzier. And so, when you made a movie on a budget like this, if the effect wasn't perfect, typically, when you saw it on the film, those really forgiving prints would kind of cover up the mistakes. Now, and again, I did it again, but they're not really mistakes. They knew that they were there, but you were just not going to notice them. This actually happened with another George Pal classic, The War of the Worlds. You see, in the original way that the film was shown, you would never have seen the wires holding up the spacecrafts. That's because of that soft glow, that soft image that you were seeing in the theater would just mask over those strings and you never would have seen it. However, with every reissue, the strings became more and more comedically noticeable until the point where, in order to restore the film to the way it was originally meant to be seen, they digitally removed the wires when they did the restoration. This was not a correction of an error, this was actually taking the film back to the way you were originally supposed to see it. But as it is, I actually don't mind seeing them. I like to see the strings on some effects, because it shows the hard work and ingenuity of the people who put these effects together. They couldn't rely on the ability to fix it in editing, the way we do now. They couldn't shoot everything bland and add color correction later. No, these people had to get it right. And yeah, when they got it wrong, or by our standards, gave work that is more noticeably fake, it still speaks to the hard work that they did to get it as good as it was. Some of the effects in the 2002 movie are objectively more realistic. But again, that's not the measure of a special effect. The special effects in the 1960 film were groundbreaking. That's why they won an Oscar. They went to places that nobody had ever gone before. People dog on CG, so I don't want to harp on it too much because I actually like CGI. But it's pretty obvious that in 2002, these were the state of the art. These effects didn't do that much groundbreaking new stuff. The 1960 film had to get so creative that they actually did break ground purely out of the necessity to tell the story in as good of a way as they could. So that's all. I'm through harping on it today. I just wanted to point out some of the great effects and some of the great moments that now we take for granted. There is a good reason why The Time Machine is a classic. It's got a great story, great performances, great music, and a great director, but it also has great special effects. Thank you everybody for watching. God bless you, and I will see you in the next one.